Great, thanks, Jill. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you here, and we really appreciate you joining us. And you're absolutely right, Jill. Protecting your business doesn't have to be spooky. So I'm Katha Sheeler. I decided not to dress up as a witch today, but I did gather a whole group of witches, warlocks, and wizards that are going to be able to help you from their separate industries really navigate through that haunted trail to make sure that your business is safe. Like we said, it doesn't have to be spooky, so I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about who we have on the panel today. We've included industry experts from human resources, the insurance industry, cybersecurity, and technology management. So let's get started by looking at our agenda. I'm going to be introducing all of the panelists today. One of the panelists, specifically Billy Henze from Helm Point, will be discussing the state of cybersecurity. We're going to go through, as Jill mentioned, a series of questions and answers, and then we're going to open it up to the audience and then have a wrap up. So, Billy, why don't you get us started and tell us a little bit about the state of cybersecurity today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. My name is Billy Hennessy. I'm an account representative over at Helm Point Solutions. We're a small DoD women-owned contractor. We also do information assurance work for the NSA community. And that's kind of how our personal cybersecurity journey started. So I'll get into that a little bit, but let me start off by saying, obviously, cybersecurity is a huge problem. It's the problem of the decade, according to the CEO of Google. And some of the people may not have realized that until they went to go fill up their gas tanks last March, and the Colonial Pipeline was ransomware and shut down due to a cyber attack. So immediately right there, every day, Americans in the Mid-Atlantic felt the pain of what a cybersecurity attack could really look like on a broad scale. So unfortunately, Colonial Pipeline was unable to defend against that ransomware attack and ended up paying a ransomware of $4.4 million. So that's a huge amount of money to be handing over to cyber theft. Cyber theft in 2022 is expected to be $7 trillion. The GDP of the United States is only about $20 trillion. So cyber crimes in 2022 are equaling about 1/3 of the United States economy. So there's obviously a huge market for these cyber criminals to continue to steal your data and take advantage of that information. The average ransomware payment in 2022 is about $211,000. So that is an alarming number. And for small to medium-sized businesses, that can put you under very quickly. The most common way cyber attacks are initiated is typically through a phishing email that goes out in a spray attack that just hits every inbox that they can, and they hope that untrained professionals, hopefully that you don't have on your staff, are clicking the links and becoming victims to the malware or ransomware that are attached in those emails. A robust cybersecurity program is really a cultural change, and I tell people this all the time. It's not just implementing some flashy technology or implementing patch management. It's really having a strong base. You got to have cybersecurity insurance. You got to have a strong HR policy. You got to have someone pushing the antivirus and the patch management. You have to have a cybersecurity framework that your information can be governed by. I think that's really important and very overlooked. If you don't have some type of cybersecurity framework that can govern where you're going, then you might need to adopt one.
Perfect. Billy, we truly thank you for your insight, and that actually is a nice segue. I'd like to introduce Tammy from Impact HR. Tammy, tell us a little bit about your experiences with, HR and human resources and how cyber impacts your world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katha. Well, first of all, yes, my name is Tammy Besser, and I am a senior HR consultant with Impact HR. We're a woman-owned business located in Columbia, Maryland, and we handle the full spectrum of HR-related matters for small to medium-sized companies primarily. but we will take on large companies as well. But what we do is we maximize the performance of people, HR processes, and technology. Now, as HR relates to cybersecurity, it is true that HR is often not typically a primary owner or driver of cybersecurity or cyber risk management. And in fact, most companies, this responsibility is delegated first to, like Billy said, IT departments, information security departments, the C-suite executive leadership level, finance, legal. HR oftentimes is at the bottom of the list. Sometimes we're not on the list at all. But in recent years, the HR role in cybersecurity has become increasingly more important by helping companies determine what the enforcement permissions are, what access is being granted to certain employees, helping the InfoSec and ID department formulate cybersecurity policies, and of course, training on those policies, and then responding to breaches of cybersecurity involving employees and violations of cybersecurity policies. And the other thing that is affecting cybersecurity a lot in most recent years, especially during the pandemic, is that not only is the use of technology increasing in our workplace, but we have a lot of remote workers now who are accessing company networks and using their own computers sometimes, or company equipment at home. And we have to make sure that there are policies in place to protect the information with remote workers across the nation. We aren't talking about just violations in the home state of where the company is, but we've got national now concerns. We've got employees and could possibly be located in every state of our nation. And in conclusion, I wanted to just say Billy is right. The cybersecurity and the increased emphasis on cybersecurity is affecting many company cultures, and that's why the HR role is so important.
Tammy, thank you. I really appreciate your insights on how we can connect those dots. And yeah, it's not a matter of if you're going to get a cyber attack, it's when. And Desmond, if you could give us a little bit of insight to your role for cyber insurance with Heller Kowitz.
Sure. So Desmond Arup, I'm Director of Insurance Solutions at Heller Kowitz Insurance Advisors. We're a boutique firm in Timonium, Maryland, and we place cyber insurance policies for small and medium-sized businesses. That job is now turned into actually helping people qualify for the coverage, which has gotten more difficult. And then, unfortunately, but it will come around to a time when you have to file a claim.
Terrific. Thank you, Desmond. And then, what happens when we have to remediate the issues that have happened? I'd like to introduce Michael Bissonette from DP Solutions. Michael, tell us a little bit about your role in how we're successful with our clients.
Yes, my name is Michael Bissonette. I'm the technical security engineer here at DP Solutions. I handle the phishing and security awareness training for our clients. I also help analyze infrastructure and make security recommendations to our clients for security solutions. Yes, training is definitely needs to be on the forefront of this, just because these cyber attacks are changing every day. The landscape of these cyber threats are changing. So making sure that I'm ahead of these ever-changing cyber attacks is definitely something that I'm taking care of on for DP Solutions.
Perfect. So now you guys have whet my appetite. I want to know more. I want to understand, we obviously, Billy has gone through the current state of cybersecurity. I'd like to understand more about, how we go about doing this. And let's dive into some of the details. We do have a series of questions that we've put together. And what we're hoping that this will stir some interest among yourselves, so that if you have any questions, as Jill mentioned earlier, you can raise your hand, or we can answer those questions at the end if something comes out specifically. Or if we run out of time today, we absolutely will send out all of the answers and make sure that we address everything that you're concerned with. So why don't we go ahead and get started? As we said before, we've got a nice panelist here, and these are the faces of each one of their organizations, but they also have the wizards, as I say, behind the curtain that are all working on their teams to be able to deliver their respective roles and their importance within the cybersecurity framework that we're trying to create here. And it definitely impacts all of these different areas. So what is the biggest threat? I'm going to toss this ball over to Billy. What do you think the biggest threat today would be to my business, and how do I prepare for it?
Yeah, I think the biggest threat is clearly cybersecurity. I think that keeping your proprietary information safe to your business is a huge obstacle that you're going to have to face as a business owner. Last thing you want to do is go revert back everything to pen and paper. The genie's kind of out of the bottle with it as far as it comes with technology, and we're going to be able to scale and advance as a society. We're going to have to rely on that technology. How you prepare for that? I think you need to partner with great folks like DP Solution and other MSPs that help you with patch management, have an HR policy for onboarding, offboarding, have a cybersecurity framework that aligns with the information that you're governed by, and having cybersecurity information, cybersecurity insurance. I think these are all different elements to a strong cybersecurity posture.
Makes total sense. So Mike, give us a little idea. We talked about utilizing someone like DP Solutions. What size or type of business is most at risk that you've seen with our own client base, or just that you've experienced in the industry?
Yeah, so I would say small to medium-sized businesses are most at risk. In a recent study done by Accenture, it was found that 43% of all cyber attacks are aimed at small businesses. This is usually due to the fact that most small businesses are viewed as easy targets. They usually lack the resources of a larger company. They are also more likely to lack security expertise or choose not to invest in security solutions at all.
Terrific. So, Mike, if you could expound on that, what risks do you find that are most common within these businesses?
So social engineering is the most common threat to small businesses. In a study done by Barracuda Networks, it was found that small businesses with less than 100 employees will receive 350% more social engineering attacks than an employee at a larger company. 51% of those social engineering attacks are from phishing. So ultimately, the biggest risk factor is going to be the end user, the employees. If your employees are not being trained on the current social engineering tactics, then your organization will be vulnerable to these threats. This is why training is so vital to the security of your organization. So that's some of the risk factors. Let's talk about overall impact that an incident could have on an organization. So the overall impact could include damage to information, regulatory fines and legal fees, loss of critical information, loss of trust from your customers, and loss of business income. These are all things that we need to protect against, and training is a huge aspect of that.
And yeah, absolutely. And in my world, I talk about the human firewall, right? And so those employees and training the employees is critical to being one more peg in the spoke and wheel that really is all of cybersecurity. So Tammy, I would appreciate if you could tell us a little bit more about the role itself of how the human aspect, how does it impact cybersecurity?
Well, I think the role of HR in helping to prevent cybersecurity is kind of a multi-dimensional role that we have. First, I think we need to recognize what the threats are. So risk assessment is really critical for an HR professional to undertake. We need to understand what those risks are. Now, we could certainly rely on experts like Desmond's company, and make sure that we have the right cyber insurance in place. But we need to look at things as simple as our workstations, misplacement of ID cards, access to unsecured work areas in the company. Now, this is all difficult when you're working with remote workers or may not even apply, but we're talking about access to certain applications and certain aspects of the company's network. So all of this has to be examined and a risk assessment done to determine, what the greatest risks are to the company's information. Now, HR professionals by nature are exposed to a lot of sensitive business data. I mean, we take care of employee personal data, social security cards, salary data, benefits enrollment, including medical information sometimes. All of this needs to be protected. So not only do HR professionals have to look at their own team and make sure that we are well trained and know what to do to prevent hackers or prevent undisclosed information. We've also have to put in place the policy and procedures. Those cannot be written or formulated in isolation. We have to collaborate with the likes of the Billies and the Michaels and the Desmonds to figure out what we need to do in terms of codifying the company's policies and putting them in place. And then I can talk later on about the training aspect that keeps coming up, and that is certainly one of the great big areas that HR can participate in cybersecurity risk management.
Thanks, Tammy. So when you talk about policies, it's interesting because everyone generally thinks about an insurance policy, right? But yet there are policies within an organization that need to be mandated and followed and then held accountable to. So,
That's right.
Desmond, if you would, could you tell us a little bit about cyber insurance policy's role in cybersecurity as well as risk management?
Absolutely. So basically, the role is to transfer risk from doing business online by protecting the company's interests. Now that covers a ton of things from like sales, marketing, customer communications, funds transactions, employee interactions, and absolutely anything to do with computer communication, whether that be a desktop, mobile, what have you. A cyber insurance policy is a valuable tool and a part of a cybersecurity effort. It's essential, but it's not effective by itself. I will say we need everyone in this room here. It needs to be paired with what's already been mentioned a couple times. Frontline defenses, employee education is key for those small and medium-sized businesses, and that's the core of a good security program that an insurance policy is a part of, but not a standalone answer to any of these issues.
Great. So let me ask you, what does a company need as a prerequisite to have a proper coverage?
Well, as it stands right now, it's going to be, it's going to start with MFA, which is multi-factor authentication. According to Microsoft, that's going to knock out about 99% of the threats out there today. But I will say that 1% comes into play way more than you think. And that's due to just the sheer amount of transactions that a firm will have online with its employees, its customers. The amount of exposure is massive, even for a small company. So the insurance carriers quickly got tired of insuring, let's call it cyber houses below the flood zone after being dinged with very shallow policies before. So it's becoming a little self-fulfilling that these cyber insurance policies have a lot of prerequisites that they need in order to write the protection you want. So in the beginning, it was very easy to get a policy and didn't have to do very much. And now it's getting more difficult to qualify with a policy because of the attacks and the many angles that they come from.
Absolutely. So, Billy, why don't you share with us, if an organization wants to start a cybersecurity program, where should they start?
Yeah, great question. I think an organization needs to evaluate what type of information they're hosting and what type of information they have access to. For example, they may be a healthcare clinic that has access to personal health information, or they may be an accounting firm that has access to financial information. Those are going to be subject to HIPAA or SOX or PCI potentially. There's government contractors that are subject to NIST 800-171 for controlled unclassified information. So I think any good cybersecurity program starts at what type of data you have, and then building from there. Finding out how that data flows throughout your organization, and then saying, okay, look, we're getting this information from, whether you're making that information or you're getting it from a patient or a contractor sending it to you. Figure out how to lock that information down to make sure it's secure, and then put policies, procedures around it, and use an MSP to also, or have internal IT staff to make sure that you're meeting the requirements around that framework, whether it be HIPAA, NIST, whatever you're subject to. And then have an insurance policy that reflects that as well, to make sure that if you do get breached, that your butt's covered and you aren't going to be shutting the doors to the business in the next 6 months.
I love it. And I will tell you, there is a quiz at the end with all the acronyms that we've all shared over the last 15 or 20 minutes, and you will have to answer what those are. And if you need any questions, I'm sure this series of panelists will be able to help you understand further, because our industry tends to throw a lot of acronyms around. So if anyone has a question about any one of them, please let us know. So as we move forward, I'd like to get more down to brass tacks. What are some more technical, from a technical perspective, what are some things, some real day-to-day things that a business can do to protect themselves from a cyber attack? Mike, would you go ahead and give us some insight there?
Yeah, so I believe the best thing a business can do to protect themselves is to be prepared. Small businesses need to adopt a mindset or a culture of cybersecurity within their organization. We need to get out of the mindset that, oh, this hasn't happened to me previously, I'm probably good. As you said earlier, Katha, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a cyber incident will occur. Cyber incidents do occur every 11 seconds these days. So some of the things that we can do to prepare, like Billy was saying, NIST offers a great cybersecurity framework for, if you don't know where to get started, this is a great first step to look. NIST recommends 5 steps that you should take: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Identify is going to be what Billy just talked about. Identify what assets you need to protect, what kind of data do you hold, and what are your policies and procedures. Protect is going to be limiting access to that data and information, such as access controls. Does your building require badge access to get into the building? Does your server room have locks on the doors? Detect is going to be installing and updating antivirus software. And then hopefully moving on to IPS and IDS systems, intrusion protection, intrusion detection systems. Respond is going to be developing a plan and having these incident response plans and disaster recovery plans in place so people know their roles and responsibilities in the event of a cyber incident. Then recover, making sure that you have good backups, making sure you have off-site backups, and considering cyber insurance for the recovery step. And then lastly, you want to make improvements to these processes, procedures, and technologies over time.
Perfect. Mike, I really appreciate all that you've said, and I can tell you with many of our clients, you know, it is a struggle because they're so worried about their day-to-day functioning that they tend to lose sight of, oh my gosh, that 2 a.m. worry of what's going to happen if I get attacked, and to know that they have the confidence that they've got all the, you know, T's crossed and the I's dotted when it comes to this. It doesn't mean that they won't have an issue, but it's how well they can recover afterwards and what they have in place. And I think that's critical. So Tammy, as an HR professional, how do you go about preventing cyber threats?
Well, I think that education, like Mike and Billy both emphasized, is critical. It's great to write policies. It's great to do the risk assessment. It's great to understand what our risks are. But if the employees don't know what their role is in the company, then everything is going to fall apart. So HR can play a role in helping to collaborate with the InfoSec office and the IT departments by doing a number of things related to training. And it starts actually at the interview process, because once we decide to identify a candidate to hire, we need to make sure that they have the right values that fit the culture of the company. We need to understand that they take cybersecurity as importantly as we do. So once we make an offer, you should do a background check. You know, you should make sure we aren't hiring thieves or previous people who had done cyber attacks. So it starts at that stage. Then onboarding is a critical part of preventing cyber security risk, because we need to train the employees. We need to describe what their roles and responsibilities are. And it's not just training one time. It's not just training onboarding. It's got to be regular, ongoing, periodic training, maybe every 6 months. We need to make sure that they have the policies, that they have read them, that we have a sign-off acknowledgement form, that they understand what their roles are, and keep enforcing that training and education piece throughout their life with the company. That's very critical.
Well, it's interesting, Tammy, that you said that. So you must have been sitting around the dinner table at my house last night, because my husband works for a very large organization, and he unfortunately was the vector of phishing, the testing that's going on, and he keeps clicking the wrong button. So they actually have a punitive piece to their HR where, over time he was clicking the wrong thing over and over again. So he was having to go through additional training where he had to take, modules and training on a webinar like this for their employees to be able to know this is what you need to look for so that you don't keep clicking. And I am embarrassed to say, Michael, you caught me. We just did a phishing attempt, and yes, I clicked the button and the bats were flying all over the place because it was about Halloween costumes, which was very relevant to my world today since our organization is having a Halloween party. What was an appropriate costume? What wasn't? And of course, knowing me, if you do know me, I clicked on, let's see what is not appropriate, because we all don't want to be that person showing up to the party. And yes, I was phished by my own Michael Bissonette. Thank you very much, Michael. But you can see, you think, even though I work in the industry, if you're rushing around, and the email is definitely a vector. So I have a quick question for you, Timmy, around, what else could a HR director do? How do you deal with actually the frequent offender in an organization that is continuing to, behave poorly when it comes to good cyber hygiene? Sorry, I couldn't get that one out.
Well, I think from an HR perspective, one of the things that I always try to remember is that you have to give employees the benefit of the doubt. You have to collect the data. You have to investigate, make sure that there is a real intentional cybersecurity situation here. Was it an accident? Was it lack of training? We all most of us want to come to the job to do the very best we can, but we make mistakes and we learn from those mistakes. So you have to make sure that any kind of violation wasn't intentional. And the only way that you can determine that is to collect the data and do the proper investigation, interview witnesses if there are witnesses, rely on folks like Michael to, dig deep into the system to see if there is a pattern that you can see. And I'm not a tech person, but I'm sure that Michael is skilled in identifying things that are threatening or a problem. But then the bigger question is, what do you do about it? If you determine that there is intention, and whether there is, purposeful intent on the employee's part to do harm to the company, then you certainly want to address it right away. You can't let that just linger on. You have to determine, as a manager, as a company, what are we going to do to enforce the rules and regulations and policies? Does that mean termination? Does that mean suspension from the job? Does that mean more education? And to do it fairly. That's an HR hat I always put on is let's just do our due diligence.
Yep. Well, absolutely. I appreciate that. So I'd like to turn it over, if we could, to Billy for a few minutes, and I want to shift the conversation around, government contracting, and we have this big acronym that's been thrown around, CMMC. Could you go into, what is the impact on business in all levels of business, not just government contracting?
Yeah, great question. So CMMC is the cybersecurity maturity model. CMMC essentially is so there's 3 different levels. Level 1 is the FAR clause. So if you have any federal government contract, you're subject to at least those 15 controls that you need to self-attest to. The level 2 is for the controlled unclassified information. That's a little more advanced than a level 1, but level 2 is for most DoD contractors. It revolves around 110 different practices and 300 different objectives associated with those practices. And then that level 3 is NIST 800-172. And that is still being defined. As they say, there's going to be 134 controls, but I hear they're still juggling some things on that level 3. So essentially with that level 2 is, if you have a NIST 800-171 and a DFAR 7012 clause, those are going to be assessed in that level 2 assessment. So it's going to be a third-party assessment of NIST 800-171 your organization is going to be subject to, starting in 2023 is after the rulemaking is made. What is it going to mean for all businesses? That's still going to be determined. All federal contract vehicles, if you will, are trying to decide if they're going to adopt CMMC or if they're going to make up their own cybersecurity standard for all of their contracts. I do foresee in the near future that insurance companies are going to adopt a framework like NIST incident response. I believe it's 7834. I believe is what the number is, and don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure I might have messed that up. But essentially, what it is a checklist for organizations that identify, protect, and make sure that if they do get ransomware, they can recover. So that's what I think all organizations eventually are going to have to go through to get cybersecurity insurance. So
great. So in a nutshell, we need to plan and prepare. We need to implement these plans and have our proper due diligence within our organization and our day-to-day walk as we work. And then if and when, like we talked about, something happens, how do we mitigate the risk and how do we remediate? So I'd like to turn it over to Desmond for a minute and talk a little bit about how insurance, because that's the end game. I mean, you need to prepare in the beginning. You've got to execute a cyber insurance policy, but what's the evolution and history behind of where we are with cyber insurance and the products that are out there?
So actually, it's pretty funny, but the first cyber insurance policy was written in 1997. Not a big event there, obviously. And then the product ramped up significantly for Y2K, if you remember that term, or if you were that old. From there, it relatively went pretty stagnant, only covered first-party damages from hacks. But that quickly changed. And in my opinion, the pandemic itself turned small and medium-sized businesses into piñatas for cyber attacks. So it has evolved tremendously. The product is now covering both first, third-party losses as well, and then there's regulatory penalties that can be covered if you don't stay on top of your game with firms like DP Solutions. Basically, the biggest evolution of the product, I would say, is that they don't just solely respond to a claim; they're actively protecting you and your firm. And by that, I mean, the policies that we write have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week scans trying to protect your firm and your employees to either alert you of or completely avoid a breach to minimize the damage that's done.
Great. So I'm not going to claim, I told you earlier that we have some witches and warlocks and obviously some wizards within their industry, but now I'm going to ask you to be a fortune teller. So what do you think the future of cyber insurance coverage is going to look like?
Well, right now, I think it's dialed in very well. I think that it's an outstanding proactive tool that you can defend yourself and your business against all kinds of attacks. And, basically you want to stay in business. I know that backups are the #1 priority, and then cyber insurance would be #2. And so we're going to continue to work with your firm and the defenses of to protect our customers. But actually, I think when it comes to the future, we're going to need a little bit help from the federal government and maybe even on the state level. By that, I mean, I did a little research. I think the biggest one I found is CNA Financial. It's actually a commercial insurance company. They paid out $40 million in ransomware, an attack in March in 2021.
Wow.
And I personally think that that's just making things worse. Billy already mentioned the pipeline, the Colonial Pipeline. I think they paid out 4.4. They've recovered about 2.2 in cryptocurrency. But in my opinion, you know, if you feel that higher education tuition is going through the roof because the federal government subsidized it, I think that you'll agree that these big insurance payouts are not helping. I also think a gray area in cyber insurance coverage is basically a battle between the government and the insurance industries is when they're attacked by nation states. So is that an act of war or is that not? And I think that that conversation is going to come up and play a key role as we go through time with being attacked by nation states, not just, you know, teenagers in your neighborhood.
You know, it is scary. We all think of a cybersecurity. We were actually joking and saying Mike should dress up for Halloween with a hoodie on and, you know, put a ski mask on. And you think of somebody, a troll in the basement, just trying to ping IP addresses to find a way to get into somebody's computer. But what we're realizing is you can't just throw your wallet at the issue, right? You need to buy that insurance coverage, and that is a key reason to spend time with an organization like yours. But the bottom line is, you know, yes, the events happened. What do you do to get back to normal? Your business, you know, has been obliterated. It could be by this situation. So how do you get back to normal business operations after you've had an attack? Mike, can you give us some insight on what you've seen in the industry and some of the trends now?
Yes, so this is a tough question to answer because it could be it can vary. There's many factors that go into the answer to this. Research recently done by the Cybersecurity Ventures shows that 60% of small businesses close their doors within 6 months of a cyber attack.
Wow.
I don't want to scare anybody with that number. If your organization is implementing the things that we have all discussed today, I believe a realistic time frame could be about 27 days. I have seen anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks, depending on a lot of factors. What kind of attack it was, how prepared are you? Do you have an incident response plan? Do you have a business continuity plan? All of those things will play a role into how long it's going to take you to get back to normal business.
Great. So obviously we have talked a lot about different areas. I know the big thing that I've talked about with clients is, do you have a strong backup of your data? So if in fact you are hit, I had one situation years ago with a client that they had the good backup, but the backup was bad and they didn't know it because they didn't do DR testing for year on, year out. And so, you know, that in itself, that assessment of where you are, the state of the state within your business, I think is crucial to planning, as I said earlier, to plan and prepare. Then what are you doing on the day-to-day to implement these things? And then at the end of it, how do we mitigate that risk? And that's really in Desmond's world, you know, mitigation of risk. Billy, if you could tell us a little bit about, you know, what do you see for cybersecurity in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I see more small businesses being vulnerable if they don't step up to the plate and take responsibility for their information that they currently have. I see the cybersecurity attacks, like Desmond was saying, being amplified through insurance payments and possibly stipend from the government. And I hate to say that, but that might be what it takes to keep a lot of small businesses from closing, because like Michael just mentioned, 60% of small businesses close in 6 months after a cybersecurity attack. That's a huge number. And unfortunately, there's a lot of organizations that are failing to be prepared for that day when they do get some type of cybersecurity attack on them. So I foresee in the next 5 years, insurance companies or some type of standard being put across the board to help organizations keep their cybersecurity insurance and work towards mitigating the risk factors to cyber attacks.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And one of the, we were really excited to put this panel of experts in front of you guys today, because we wanted to make sure that each one of you took away 1 or 2 key nuggets of information. And what I'd like to do is ask each of the panelists to give us their, what's one key takeaway that you want the audience to have learned from today, and then hopefully take action on. Billy, why don't you go ahead and give yours, and then Tammy follow.
Yeah, key takeaways. If you don't have one already, establish a cybersecurity program. Make sure you have those policies, procedures in place. Make sure you have somebody that's pushing those that patch management, that antivirus. Make sure you have a intrusion protection system. Make sure you have that cybersecurity insurance, because if you don't, you're behind the 8 ball and you're just waiting to get hit.
Great. And Tammy?
Yeah, so I'm going to cheat. Like Billy, it's not just one thing. Certainly training comes into mind. But I also took away from what I was hearing from the other panelists that it's a critical issue that has to be a collaboration between IT, HR, and executive leaders, right? And I think that every organization must come to understand that cybersecurity is not just an IT issue. It's not just an insurance issue. It's not just an expert like Billy issue. It is the entire company has to be involved in cybersecurity, developing policies, but also creating a robust plan to address incident responses to those plans. We're talking about making sure it's part of your business continuity plan. And if you don't know what that is, then, contact me and I'll let you know. But, we talk about hazards like hurricanes and power outages, but most people don't realize cybersecurity can devastate a company, like Billy said. So you need to have a plan in your business continuity plan to address that. And also make sure you involve HR, because if you find out that there are violations or breaches within your company by your own employees, then HR is going to play a critical role in figuring out what the enforcement rules are, what the consequences will be of that breach or violation. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Desmond, could you give us your one nugget that you'd like everyone to walk away with?
Sure.
Maybe
So,
two.
I mean, cyber insurance, I think, is an outstanding financial tool for modern day business, and it definitely should be a part of your cybersecurity efforts, no doubt. But I want to make sure that we don't confuse an actual cyber insurance policy with your P&C policy that may have very limited and narrow coverages. There's a whole article written in the New York Times about the company Mondelez, the food company. They were hacked, and their claims were denied, millions of dollars in claims. And it basically is because they didn't have cybersecurity, it's like cyber insurance. They just had lines of coverage on their P&C policy. So please don't get confused with something that you think you have that you don't. So make sure you have the correct coverages to protect yourself from, I think, the inevitable.
Absolutely. And I'm going to let you round it out. Mike, give us your, 2 cents key takeaways.
The biggest thing that I would like everyone to take away from today is that we've already taken step 1. We've started the conversation. Now it will just be on following up with any of these great panelists or us here at DP Solutions on how you can implement some of these solutions in your organization to help protect what you care about, your assets.
So, and I'm going to, finish the circle basically is to the center of all this is really how do you mitigate risk? And how do you take that risk and minimize that, right? And what are you doing? What do you have in place? What keeps you up at night? Are you worried about what's going on in your own business? Because if you have employees and you have data that you're housing, then you have risk. So what we're all hoping to do is just really to expose what are some of the things that you should be thinking about, and then each and every one of us can work with you at any given time to be able to dive into that further. before we end, I'd like to open it up to any questions from the audience. And Jill, I think you're keeping an eye if there's anything specific that anyone's reached out to us about.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, use the question box to go ahead and type those in. I don't see anything yet. But what I will say while you guys are thinking about that is if something comes up, like Katha said earlier, if you think of something later on today, just shoot us an email. And we'll get it out to the panel and they'll be happy to. Oh, okay. We see that Jonathan has a question. So let's see. Jonathan, I have unmuted you to go ahead and ask your question. There you are.
Okay, all right. Just this is probably more directed to Desmond. Is there a correlation between like having SOAR solution like security orchestration automated response in an XDR and having those affect your cybersecurity insurance premium and a discount or something?
Well, as the policies have evolved, yes, the more we get involved with that, the more, let's call it the lines of discounts you're going to qualify for. So the more you build up and bolster your frontline defenses and more policies you put into place, all of those things are going to reduce your premiums. And I would assume that that is not only evolving, through the year, but as I look at applications and the questions they're asking, there's going to be more and more things that pop up that you can do to reduce premiums.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Hopefully that answered your question. Anyone else have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Okay. I don't see any other questions. I think, Katha, we could probably go ahead and wrap up. But like I said, we'll send out a recording of the email. You can reply to that with any questions that you may think of later.
Yeah, and I think I can speak for everyone on the panelist today. If you do have these questions and you would like for us to dive deeper and take a look at your own individual business and how we might be able to as a group or individually assist you in any way, we are an open book and we would love to be able to help. Thank you so much for today. I appreciate your time. And like I said, don't be afraid. Enjoy Halloween.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Take care.
Kathy.